Hello, 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 and welcome to the second segment of hashtag TMA PodCon 21, Building a Loud, Loyal Audience. I am Captain Bootscoot, aka Vanilla Husband, aka your host for this segment, Jesse from the Sudden But Inevitable Rewatch. Of course, that's the show where we take some of our best friends through some of our favorite TV shows, one or two episodes at a time, and we get them to love them. Now, with a show like that, and I mean, honestly, with any show, really, you got to have an audience, right? And that's kind of why we all make indie podcasts. I don't know. That's a big part of why I make an indie podcast, is because I want people to listen to my friends and I experiencing something relatable and fun. So that's what I'm going to cover today in my topic, building a loud, loyal audience. Before I get there, though, I would like to point out that we here at the Twist My Arm Network have a loud, loyal audience. So much so that we have our own shop, and all of the money that goes into this show has come from our listeners and our pockets, obviously. But we don't have any sponsorships or anything like that. Any profit that the show has made, which I assure you is truly razor thin, but meaningful in a sentimental way, has been because our listeners care about us. They care about our success. They want to show their support for us in real life. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's so cool that you guys are doing this free podcast convention full of other indie podcasters and giving away all these free tips for everybody. And I agree. We're very happy to do that. We want to be part of the rising tide that lifts all ships, those ships being your indie podcast and ours. But as a fun little bonus, we are giving away a TMA PodCon gift box that my friend Josh, the head of the Twist My Arm Network, had talked about. Contained within that gift box is this very cool, very new TMA PodCon 21 t-shirt. If I could get a little bit of a blow up on that, click on that shirt chest. I think it zooms in if you click on it. Either way, oh man, that is crispy. Look at that. That is gorgeous. For those of you that are listening to the podcast version of TMA PodCon 21, just go to twistmyarmpodcast.com, click on the shop tab, and then click on Twist My Arm Podcast. You will see this very, very cool TMA PodCon 21 t-shirt. On the back, it says Podstaff. So if you happen to be, I don't know, maybe one of the speakers today or one of our very cool indie podcaster friends that we've collaborated with over the past 6 or 7 months, this is the kind of shirt that you can put on and feel good about because you know that it's supporting an indie podcast network of actual real-life friends. It's not going to some faceless corporation that just pumps these things out every hour where you sit down and then boom, magically a podcast appears. There is also a variation on that shirt coming for those of you that just want to support the network but maybe aren't podcasters. The back of that shirt will say Pod Fan. So keep your eyes open for that. We really, really appreciate all of our listeners and viewers, all of our friends, everybody in the indie podcasting world. We wouldn't be right here doing an indie podcast convention without you folks. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for supporting us as much as you have. We have been very warmly embraced by the community. Now, to speak to the topic at hand, building a loud, loyal audience. That's every podcaster's dream, right? Like I said before, maybe it's not every podcaster's dream, but that's an important part of figuring out why you're doing a podcast in the first place. If you're doing a podcast as a hobby and you want to have some fun with your friends and numbers and things like that aren't really important to you, that's great. I am not here to look down on that. I'm not here to tell you that's the wrong way to do a podcast. I am here to tell you that I don't know that my tips are going to help you with that, because I wanted to create a podcast that people care about. People ask when the next episode is coming out. People are upset if they miss an episode. People want to be there for the recording of. People want to buy merchandise to support that show. So that's the kind of show that I'm going for. So if that's not the show that you want to build, then these tips are probably not geared for you. And that's okay, because like I said, you need to know when you start why you're doing this podcast. So for me, a big part of why we started Sudden But Inevitable is I'm a big podcast listener. I think a lot of podcasters are big podcast listeners. And I've heard so many podcasts that have this sense of familiarity between the hosts, right? Where you can tell they've really known each other for a long time. They're really enjoying the show that they're making, and they're really having fun interacting with each other in whatever their format might be, right? So as I listened to a bunch of shows like that and remembered, oh yeah, I have a friend who has a podcast network. I bet we can make a podcast together. I thought, I want to make a show that really captures that feeling of trying to get one of your best friends in the world to like your favorite things, in an almost force it down their throat kind of way, but that friendly force it down their throat kind of way, which is not super specific, right? Or rather, it is super specific, but it's not a super clear idea. So I had to distill that into like one sentence that I could just tell people, hey, this is what the show is about. It's getting our friends to love the things that we love as much as we love them. So everybody knows what that's like, right? Everybody has had that friend that they're like, if I could just get them to watch or read or listen to or participate in thing X, I know they would love it. And that's the relatable part of our show. The relatable part of our show isn't necessarily Firefly is my favorite TV show, or Cowboy Bebop is my favorite TV show, or Star Wars, or Mandalorian, or any of these things. Maybe those aren't your favorite things, but you know what it's like to try to get somebody to love your favorite thing. And that's why we go seasonal at Sudden But Inevitable, so that we can jump show to show and, get them to like different things. Keep your eyes out for season 3. We're about halfway through season 2, and we are already in the planning stages. So, once you know that you want to make a show that people are going to care about, and once you know what the essence of your show is, you need to picture your listener, okay? Who's going to listen to this show? First of all, let me say, the number one listener for your show, the biggest fan for your show, should always be you. If you don't care enough about your show to be out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all these different platforms promoting it part of every day of every week, because that is what it takes to stay in the front of people's minds. It's not, your show is not bad. It's just that there's so much to consume. If you don't want to put that kind of effort in, A, that's okay. But B, you're not going to enjoy yourself. Like, if part of the passion for you is the work and part of the dedication for you is the final product, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to maintain your inspiration, your motivation in the times where your download numbers take a dip for no reason, or you get a 1-star review that has no actual review on it. Like, you're just going to give me 1 star and walk away? That hasn't happened to me personally, but it has happened to people in the network, and I know it's like the dumbest feeling. You're like, okay, thanks for the thumbs down, I guess. There's nothing I can work on here. There's nothing I can build from. It's just, it's very annoying. So you need to be your biggest fan. You need to be your most ardent supporter, and you need to be your hardest worker. You're going to have coworkers, you're going to have friends, you're going to have listeners, you're going to have collaborators, you're going to have all that stuff, right? None of those people are going to care about the success of your show the same amount that you will, nor should they. They have their own lives going on. If you get supremely lucky and you have co-hosts that don't have their own shows, or that aren't, working a full-time job and have 3 kids and are dedicating this much of their time to you every week, then see if you can get one of them to take over one of the socials and you only run 2 socials or something like that. The point is, you have to be the driving force behind everything in your show. Even if you have a crew, one of you has to be the driving force. Here's the secret to that. If everybody on your crew feels that way and operates that way, you're going to have an excellent show. Because if they all think, I'm the person whose shoulders the success of this beautiful thing rides on, you're going to have high dedication, you're going to have high passion, you're going to have high turnout. And that's one of the coolest feelings in the world. I don't know about you, but going through my numbers on my podcast feed and seeing that we have an episode over 200 downloads, right? That just like, I get such a hit of endorphins when that happens. And I know that it's a small thing, right? It's a small thing, but it shows that there are at least 200 people out there whose lives are different now because they listened to me and my friends talk for, let's be honest, probably 2.5 hours. So if you're going to spend that time in those people's lives, make that time worth it for those people, and they will make it worth it for you. Trust me. We have, to that point, people on Twitter, hey, I missed the episode week. I forgot that you guys were taking a week off. Where was an episode? I missed it. I went to download it. There was nothing there. I felt bad, and then I remembered. It's to have support from people that are not in your immediate circle is like the big goal, right? That's the holy grail. You want strangers and cool people listening to your podcast. So the key to all of this, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a friend of mine, Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D on the Twist My Arm Network, which is a great podcast that you should listen to, and a pretty funny account that you should go follow on Twitter at Best Flicks Ricky D. We feel that authenticity is the key to everything in indie podcasting, in communication, in basically everything in life, but especially in indie podcasting. Listeners, Twitter followers, viewers, if you do a live show, those people can spot a fake a mile away, and they can hear one even easier because they don't have your face to deceive them, right? So you cannot talk about caring about your listeners, okay? You have to care about your listeners. Message them, talk to them, ask them what they like, ask them what they don't like, ask them how their day was. They're real people. You're a real person. Just remember that every single connection that you make, whether it's a podcast account, whether it's a new follower, whether it's a new listener, those are real people. Take your time to connect with them on a meaningful, authentic level. Now, I hear what you're saying. That's easy to say. How do I do that? I'm going to tell you how to do that because I did it. I feel like that's how I reached out. That's how the Sudden But Inevitable community grew. That's how we were able to get these loud, loyal audience members. So I know that you have seen a podcast recommendation thread on Twitter, or you have, seen somebody suggest a podcast on Twitter, and there are 50 notifications on that feed, right? Because everybody whose podcast got mentioned is clicking like and thank you and leaving a GIF. It's totally cool. I 100% get it. Like I said, you have to be the number one fan for your thing. But that person is not going to listen to 50 podcasts. They're probably not going to listen to 3 of those podcasts. They're probably never going to ask for indie podcast recommendations ever again in their life. It is a somewhat traumatizing experience for people. To illustrate the point, I put podcast recommendations as a hashtag in the promotion tweet for this video. So let's see how that turns out. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't be out there hustling your show, because you should, okay? But there are more meaningful and genuine ways to do that. So when we started Sudden But Inevitable, here are some specific examples. We were covering the show Firefly. So instead of going out and finding podcast listeners, because that is a difficult group of people to find, they're already listening to all the shows they want to listen to, unless they're on Twitter asking for recommendations or they're using, some sort of discovery app. We don't have any sponsorships, so I'm not going to mention any by name yet. But the the key there is that I can't just type in, okay, give me the podcast listeners, right? But I can go find the Firefly fans. That's pretty easy. I do the search for the hashtag browncoats. I do a hashtag Firefly, all that stuff. Hashtag the verse, hashtag aim to misbehave. Go look for your related hashtags in the topic that you are covering and find some people in there. Like their stuff, comment their stuff, retweet their stuff. If you're on Instagram, leave a comment. Do that meaningful interaction with people. And don't just comment like, hey, I like Firefly too. Comment about, hey, this makes me a little bit jealous because I have a thing that's similar but not as cool. Or, find some way to connect that isn't 2 words long and that you can slap out at every person. And to that point, don't reuse your comments. Like, try to make your comments different every time. Just people see that, okay? When I get a new follower on Twitter as an indie podcaster, first of all, I love you. Second of all, do not DM me a link to your show right away. That's a great way to guarantee I'm never going to listen to your show. It's just not going to happen. When I was reaching out to people to build the Twitter from 0 to now over 1,150 followers, since January. We're now in August. I would send links that were like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for the follow. I'm sure you know that as an indie podcaster, it's hard to get your name out there. This little Firefly podcast really appreciates this small little piece of support. That's all I would say. And the way that Firefly fans are, a lot of them would immediately message me back and say, hey, I don't have a bunch of followers or this, that, or the other thing, but I'm definitely going to check your show out. Or, hey, anything Firefly is cool with me. And that was I didn't say, here's a link to my show. Please check us out. Please let me know what you think, which I fully understand the impulse to do. And there is an audience for that, and we'll get to that. But it is not podcast listeners. Like, they just want to listen to podcasts. They really don't want to give a ton of feedback and things like that. They will if it's something that really needs to be mentioned, which in that case, you're probably doing something wrong in the first place, which, again, it's all a learning process. It's totally cool. But listeners are going to listen. They're not necessarily going to talk. When I say loud, I mean these people are sharing your episode links. These people are getting their friends and family to listen in real life. 3 of the people that show up in the live chat for Sudden But Inevitable basically every week. One of them lives in Germany, one of them lives in Scotland, and they're a mother-daughter combo. And her other daughter has listened at the same time as them before, too. So they get up at like 4 and 6 a.m. in the morning to watch together our little show about Firefly and Cowboy Bebop. Like, if you had told me that was going to happen in January, I would not have guessed that it would be true, but it is true. And I think it's because we have a genuine sense of family and friendship, and they know that we weren't out to be like, hey, come listen to my show so I can get your money or, this, that, or the other thing. They want that feeling of introducing loved ones to things that they already love and hoping that they love them as much as we do. So, to that point, your listeners are, of course, going to be your livelihood, right? So you have to be authentic. When you talk to listeners, when you talk to followers, when you talk to anyone revolving around your podcast, you have to be authentic 100% of the time. You cannot be trying to pull one over on people. You cannot be trying to get some sort of benefit out of people for no work. Everyone who has an indie podcast is working their butt off to make their show work at whatever level and format and frequency it works, okay? The easier that we can make this for each other, the better. The easier we can make it for our listeners to love our show, the better. Easiest way to do that is be honest and authentic at all times. Which leads me into my second point, which is consistency. I know that consistency is a difficult thing. It's a very, very difficult thing to maintain. When I say consistency, I'm not talking about every episode has to sound exactly the same or you always have to do the same order of things on your show. You really do need to put your show out on the same day every week or every 2 weeks or every month, whatever it is. Whatever your release schedule is, you need to stick to that. It's not because somebody will suddenly be like, oh, sorry, your show's canceled, you missed a release, right? As I said before, there is so much out there for people to consume. It's an impossible number of things to even begin to comprehend, right? To stay in the forefront of people's attention span and the things that they have time to consume and want to spend time consuming, you need to be in front of them constantly. They need to see your name every week. They need to see your episode feed every week. They need to see your logo probably multiple times a day, which is why you should be on Twitter and Instagram pushing your name and face and sound as much as you can. I know you already are because you're an indie podcaster, so I don't have to tell you that, but I felt like I can't not mention it, right? If you're listening and not watching, I promise I'm smiling and I love you. Now, this consistency thing is difficult, right? We're indie podcasters. There's nobody paying us to make our shows. There is nobody going, look, man, you didn't put in your 6 hours on the show this week, so unfortunately no paycheck and no listeners. That's what it's going to translate to. But it's going to translate that to that either way. So you may as well knock your show out of the park. Get over, let me rephrase that. Don't get over whatever's bothering you, okay? Just put it aside for right now. Knock your show out of the park. If you don't have a live video podcast, which I do, and there are benefits and drawbacks to it, but if you don't have a live video podcast, push whatever you're feeling to the side. Knock your show out of the park. Get it recorded, get it released, and then apologize next week. Most of your listeners aren't even going to realize anything was wrong. We've had episodes where I did not feel great, and on camera you could tell that, but on the audio version, nobody knew. I sounded fine. So know your audience and know that they're forgiving. They like your show because it's a good show, and they like you, right? It's an indie podcast. So if they don't like the show, that's part of what makes it so hard when you get a 1-star review. It feels very personal. But if you have a personal brand as a podcaster, which is basically what you have, it's going to feel personal. I'm sorry, there's kind of no way around it. As a creator, you probably already know that, but I just feel like it should be said out loud. Now, you have to be consistent with your release schedule, because if the minute that you fall out of somebody's attention span or the forefront of their mind, some other show is going to slide right in. You know that. You know how many indie podcasts there are out there and how hard it is to stand out. That's a big part of why consistency is so key with your release schedule. The other things that I had mentioned, those are also important with consistency, but your number one thing here is definitely your release schedule. As far as the way that your show sounds, intro music, maybe your intro read, your post-credit read, things like that, that stuff needs to be consistent too. But that's going to come with practice, and that's going to come with some of the tips that you got in the last segment, Editing Out the Pain, with Josh from Twist My Arm and Sean from Cheap Seat Reviews, where if you can minimize the length of that process, then it's going to make consistency easier. Your show will sound the same because you've got your music in the same spot that it already is. You've got your levels set. Your EQs are good to go. You've got the mics plugged in. They're set. You don't have to get everything ready before every show. That is going to help your consistency big time. And if you don't have to worry about that stuff, it's going to be really, really easy for you to maintain authenticity in everything you do. Back to the first point that I was talking about. Now, if you can't, just record a show every 3 days and then drop it 2 days later because you're some kind of, human or something, here's a little trick that every indie podcaster has probably heard of, but a lot of us, myself included, are not able to take advantage of because our show is either has a very quick turnaround from live to podcast or has a format that doesn't really allow for it, that sort of a thing. So our show goes live, and that means I can't pre-record a show to put out if I'm going to be gone for a week. If your show isn't live, pre-record shows and put them out if you're going to be gone for a week. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. My friend Sean from Cheap Seat Reviews knew that he was going on vacation months ago, and he knew the dates that he would be gone, and he knew there was no way he would be able to record a podcast while on vacation with his family. Besides, even if there were a way that he could do that, why would he want to do that? He's on vacation with his family. So what did Sean do? Sean reached out to the wonderful indie podcasting community. He got a hold of me, and he got a hold of Cameron from the Green Shirt, a newbie's trek through the next generation. He said, hey guys, I'm going to be gone this 1 week in August. What do I do? I've got this idea for a show. Let's pre-record it, and then I'll release it the week that I'm gone. You guys can retweet it. It'll be great. And guess what? It was great. Go check it out. It's called Them's Fighting Nerds. Follow Sean on Twitter at CheapSeatCast. You can get a link there, or you can go to their website, which is cheapseatreviews.libsyn.com. I believe that is accurate. Now, the advantage of that is that Sean's listeners didn't miss a week of Sean, and Sean didn't even have to think about the podcast while he was on vacation with his family. All he had to do was go set the episode to publish at a later date. Everything was set. He didn't have to worry about it. He didn't even have to be on Twitter. You can set so many things to talk to each other, to auto-tweet when you publish an episode, this, that, and the other thing. If you get your workflow fast and easy, and that means scheduling posts, planning posts, having posts ready before they need to go out, even if you have a live show. For example, I have all of our Instagram posts for the week ready to go probably Monday, and then I post them until Friday. Then we have another show, and I do the same thing all over again. If you can get your workflow smooth, it's going to be so much easier for you to maintain consistency in episode release, the ways that your episode sounds, and how easy it is for you to get an episode out when you're not even around. It's just going to make everything easier. And that's going to support your consistency, which again is going to allow you to focus on your authenticity. That's generally the main point here. Now, as I had talked about before, finding genuine fans, those hashtags, those are going to be super, super helpful, right? But there are 10 million hashtags in the world. It is very difficult to find your hashtag or the hashtag that is going to closely align with what you're doing that you don't have to build the audience for. You want to find a hashtag that people are already tweeting about, but you're not looking for the hashtag with 2 million posts, right? Because you're not going to stand out. You're looking for the hashtag with maybe 400 to 1,000 posts, or maybe you're even more niche than that and you want to go for hashtags that are 50 to 300 posts. Go find those hashtags and pay attention to those hashtags. Use hashtag research tools that are free online. I don't remember what they're called, but we'll put them in the show notes. There's a lot of things that you can do with your hashtag research to zero in on a much more specific audience, which is actually another point that I should probably bring up now. You need to niche your show down. You have to niche your show down. If you can't explain it in one sentence, there's a problem. I don't have anything against the anything and everything talk show topic format shows. I don't listen to any of those because I don't. That's to me that's called the news feed, right? Like there's maybe 1 or 2 of those that I will listen to on a semi-regular basis, and it's purely because I am supporting the people involved. It's not because I'm like, oh, I'd love to just go hear a random conversation. Now, I'm not telling you there's no audience for that. What I am telling you is I don't know how to target that audience, and I have no tips for that. So if that's what you're trying to do, actually, maybe you could just niche your episodes down, and that would help you really target your episodes 1 or 2 weeks at a time, however frequently you release. That way, you're hyper-focused on that topic for a week or 2. Actually, our friends over at Digital Dissect 1 on Twitter, that's the Digital Dissection podcast, they have a very cool format where they do deep dives on different nerdy topics, and I think that that's kind of similar to what they do. They'll go really, really deep on one topic for a week or 3 weeks, maybe, for example, say Firefly, and it really lets them focus on just that thing instead of having, hey, it's a talk show. It's about nerd stuff, and it's a deep dive on this topic, or it's a deep dive on this topic. So there are ways to do it. I'm just not super familiar with them. Now, beyond the hashtags, which is a great name for a band that we should all start, to find really genuine, hardcore, loyal, supportive, vocal fans of a thing, not a trick, but a process that I have found that works really well is to go find creators of your thing. Maybe not podcasters, right? I mean, definitely find the podcasters in your niche so that you can collaborate with them and make cool episodes where you have guests. Definitely do that. But for actual listeners outside the podcasting, friend world, go find creators. Find people that are streaming games in your topic, or people that are drawing things in your topic, or people that are sewing plushies of the things in your topic, or people that make enamel pins of the things in your topic. Those people really, really care about whatever the niche is that you have chosen. They are demonstrating that by creating things in that niche, right? So, for example, we have a lot of listeners who are very, very, very passionate about Firefly. 1 or 2 of our listeners was actually in the Serenity movie, which is just mind-blowingly cool, and I can't even begin to talk about that. But a lot of our other listeners are Firefly artists. One of our most ardent supporters, who's there basically every week in the live chat, she does sketches in her sketchbook. She does digital artistry. She does, her sister does watercolor painting. Like, we've been put in touch with the Washosaurus store. I don't know if you've ever heard of that as a Firefly fan, but she makes all kinds of custom Firefly merchandise and things like that. Those people fully understand the hustle, but those people also fully understand the passion, and they share it with you. And if you don't authentically have that passion, had I just chosen Firefly because I knew people cared about it, that would not be enough. I have to care about Firefly. I have to want Josh, my Firefly first-timer, to care about Firefly. Because if I don't, why should the listeners care? They already care about Firefly. They don't need to hear somebody be like, oh, yeah, I think I remember that in that episode. It's like, or me go, it's okay if you don't like it. Like, no, they want me to go, no, consider this because you should be liking this, right? The authenticity is the key to everything. If you have passionate fans, it's going to help you maintain your authenticity. If you have consistency in your workflow and your release schedule, it's going to help you maintain authenticity. If you can niche down as far into as specific of a topic as you possibly can, that's going to help all three of those things, because now you only have basically one thing to think about. So when we're doing a season of Sudden But Inevitable, all that I'm thinking about is the TV show that we are covering. All I'm thinking about is Firefly. I'm not exaggerating. So my Instagram feed, when we were covering Firefly, the ads that I would get would say things like, designing old-timey logos? Do you need a Western barbershop font? Get this cool hand-drawn paintbrush font. Like, how specifically ridiculous is that? But it almost worked, because I was like, oh, I do need some more old-timey Western fonts. I didn't even think about that. Now, of course, I didn't buy them because I'm an indie podcaster. I went to a free 100% public use, open source, website and downloaded free fonts, which you should totally do. So it's like, I don't have to focus on, okay, what's the podcast topic this week? Or what kind of fans hashtags do I need to pay attention to? Or what kind of Facebook fan groups should I post the show link in? I know all the answer. The answer to every of those questions is Firefly. That's the kind of aesthetic I need to use for my promotions. That's the kind of vocabulary I should use on Twitter. That's the kind of attitude I should have when I guest on other people's shows. Those are the kind of references I should make when I'm talking about sci-fi on other people's shows. Like, it writes itself, right? I know that my topic is Firefly. I have authentic, consistent, passionate love for that topic. I don't have to fake it. My niche is this big. I just have to explore it. It's this big. But you know what? It's wider than my arms will go on this webcam. It's high def, but I'm not streaming in high def. Anyways, even if your topic is a tiny little niche, that does not mean that it is not super deep and wide and that you can't focus on it for as long as you need to. But it does point to why you have to care about the topic of your show. If you don't care about the topic of your show, nobody else is going to. That's not their job. That's your job. And you can be really, really good at that job. But if you're not going to stand out. You have to put time and effort into this. And I know that you already know that. Like I said, you're an independent content creator of any kind. You know that it's true. So these are some ways that you can do that. Consistency, authenticity, passion, all of that stuff. Now, as I had mentioned before, one of the hardest parts to accept when you're pouring your heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears and money and time into something like this is critical feedback. It's difficult to come by, right? Sometimes, though, when it shows up, it hurts because we're using everything we are to make this thing, right? We have a personal brand. If we boil all this down to corporate talk, we have a personal brand, okay? And getting criticism on that is going to feel personal. There is no way around that. If you didn't care what other people thought about your passion, you would not be making an indie podcast. And if you are, you're likely doing it for a hobby and not because you want it to be, anything other than that, which again, I'm not talking down to. It's just not where my personal experience lies. Ask for and accept critical feedback. Okay, your friends, your family, right? They're probably not going to listen to your show. I'm just going to throw that out there. Unless your show is, how I get along with my family, then maybe they'll listen. But even then, they might not. If you're the one editing and recording, they might not listen. Which is nothing against them. It's how it is. You have to be the driving force. You have to take that responsibility. Ask those people, hey, listen to this 5-minute thing. Let me know what you think. They're going to come back at you with, I had no idea what you were talking about, but it sounded choppy. Or, had no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds great. I think it's fine. And then, those people really, really well. So use that lens to examine their feedback. Okay, are they saying that because they're the kind of person that always wants to be nice? Or are they saying that, for because they actually feel that way. And because they're your family, you can dig on them. You can be like, look, I know you're only doing that because you're trying to be nice. Stop it. Tell me what you actually feel. Those people are never going to be like, you know what? Never contact me about your podcast again, which a stranger might do and would be well within their rights to do. But there are ways to do it. Ask your other indie podcasting friends, hey, I just put it on an episode. If I could just get some feedback on it, be 100% honest with me. You're going to need to specify the level of honesty that you want, okay? Because, so for me, a lot of times people will go, hey, check out my show. And I'll say, I'm getting this episode for lunch, or I'm going to listen to this tomorrow. And then I probably don't interact with that person anymore. It's not because I don't like them or they're a bad person. It's because I didn't enjoy your show, and I don't want you to be like, hey, how was it? Because then I'm in a position where I have to go, it was good, and I've no other feedback for you. If you DM me and go, hey, I know you listened to that episode, any feedback that you have would be much appreciated, and be as brutally honest as you need to. You know, I know that you're not emotionally connected to my show because you're not part of my show. Just what do you think? Then I can say, okay, this isn't a personal attack. It will feel like it, but I don't like this, and this. Happy to do that. DM me on Twitter @SuddenButt. Please specify the level of honesty that you want and the level of critical thinking that you want. There are not a lot of ways to get that from your listeners outside of just saying, please tell us what you think. Now, some listeners will do that, okay? You can put that call to action in your shows. Definitely do it. We do hear from our listeners, but at a certain point, your fans are just going to be that. They're going to be fans. And you go, hey, what did you guys think of the latest episode? Let us know if you have any thoughts or complaints. And they're going to go, I loved it. It was great. Love hanging out with you guys. Ton of fun. It's like, I love those so much, and they fill my heart up, and they jack my endorphin meter through the roof. It doesn't help me make a better show. And that doesn't mean that those comments have any less value, of course. It just means that, like, I'm not really able to use that other than to say, okay, well, I know that audience members, you know, A through X like it how it is. And that's cool. But if you want to stay in the forefront of people's minds and their attention, you're going to need to be open to adaptability, and you need to be open to critical feedback, and you need to ask for critical feedback. And I can't really say here's the one source for that, but I can be a little bit of a source of that for you on Twitter @SuddenButt. And like I said, ask your other indie podcast friends, ask your other creator friends. If you have friends in a band, ask them what they think. If you have friends who paint, ask them what they think. If you have friends that build stuff, ask them what they think. They're fully willing and understanding to give you creative, critical feedback. Now, here's the other thing. If you don't have a live show, this is a consistency and quality thing. If you don't have a live show, and even if you do, it depends on your audience and what they like. The hard part of editing is deciding what to cut, right? This isn't really a strength of mine because I don't do a lot of editing on our show. We're basically very... we have our dynamic pretty much down, and our live audience is very into that dynamic, and they don't want pieces cut out. And we also have a co-host on that podcast, Ricky D from Best Flicks with Ricky D, who calls out edits that happen. So it's a bit of a running joke, and also kind of just a fun little quirk of our show that we don't do much editing. But if your show is not live, or if it is and you don't mind editing some of it out, cutting is going to be a hard part, okay? Depending on what your goal is for your show, right? I want to make people laugh. I want to make people think. I want to make people cry. I want to make people feel something. Whatever your thing is, I want to make people blank. If it doesn't make you blank when you're listening to it, it's not going to make them blank when they're listening to it, right? Because as we have said before, you are the biggest fan of your show. So if you're not liking what you're hearing, why is your listener going to like what they're hearing? You need to put yourself in those shoes of the number one listener to your show. And if you're not laughing, thinking, crying, feeling, hating Josh's opinion on Star Wars, whatever it is, that was just a for instance, then why would your audience do that? Just ask yourself that question. You can use that to make a lot of meaningful cuts. If you go off on a tangent and in the moment you're like, that was hilarious, I loved that thing, and it was so perfect because everybody knew exactly what we're talking about, and then when you're listening to it, you realize, If you're not one of us three people, that makes no sense. Cut it. Your audience doesn't want to feel excluded. They want to feel included. They want to feel like they're part of your circle of friends. That's a big, big part of why people listen to shows. Or they feel like you're the authority on whatever your topic is. They don't want to hear you going off on tangents on things you're not the authority on. Because now they got to go, oh, are they super into that too? Should I be super into that? Or are they going, is that person talking out of turn? And then wait, does that mean they're talking out of turn all the time? Like, it's a can of worms. Stick to your niche. Stay authentic. Stay consistent. Stay passionate. If you can cut the pieces out of your show that don't support consistent, authentic passion, you're going to have a great show. If you can get it to a point where, a big, big portion of your show based on audience feedback is consistent, authentic passion, then you're not going to have to cut much. And that's going to make your editing process even easier. All you're going to have to do is check your levels and move along down the line. Now, I think that's most of what I have to cover today, except for the last little piece here, which is communication. Okay? If you have people that work with you on your show, if you have a co-host, if you have panelists, if you have guests, this is 90% of shows already, right? When we as creatives are communicating quickly about a project that we have high passion for, honesty and transparency are going to be key when talking to each other, okay? Everyone on our team needs to assume that when we communicate with them, there's no attitude coming from us. It's just information and honesty and passion, right? The only attitude they should be hearing is passion, not, why didn't you do this thing? Why is this thing not done? Why didn't you try thing X? They need to hear, where are we in this list of things that we're all tackling together, not how did you screw up? Open, honest, transparent communication and high modulation of your attitude and understanding of that is going to be critical to the success of your team in almost anything in life, but definitely, specifically in indie podcast creation. Because if the people on your show don't care, your listeners will hear that. You will hear that. You will feel it in your soul, and you will know that your show is not as good as it can be. And it will hurt because, as we've been talking about, you put everything that you have into this show. And if you don't, again, not looking down on you, maybe you're just doing it as a hobby. But if you're not doing it as a hobby, you know what I'm talking about. If you can't send a quick, concise, informative message to your team that they don't immediately wonder about the emotional motivations of, you're going to have problems. You need to be able to say, hey, thing X needs done 20 minutes. And the person on the other end of that needs to be able to understand, cool, this is how we all climb this ladder together. This is how we all make sure that the tide is lifting at the same rate for every ship. This is not me being put on the spot. This is not me being called out. None of that stuff. Yes, it's indie. Yes, a lot of the shows are solo. No, nobody is doing this alone. Even though I am telling you, you have to be your number one fan. You have to be the biggest driver. You have to be your biggest supporter. That's all true. That doesn't mean that you're doing it alone. The indie podcast community on Twitter is wonderfully supportive. These loud, loyal fans that you're going to go out and create with your consistent, authentic passion, those people are wonderfully supportive. They will lift you up in the moments where you feel like you can't do it yourself. I promise you that. And that's part of the benefit of taking this approach to creating a podcast, really to creating any kind of independent content. But for an independent content creator that happens to be making a podcast, these are the things that have taken Sudden But Inevitable from 0 to almost 2,000 downloads since January. It is now August 14th. We went from 0 to 1,000 downloads within our first 100 days of existing. I'm talking existing at all, having a name on the internet, having a Twitter account, having a Instagram account, any of that stuff. 0 to 1,000 in the first 100 days. I'm not sitting here telling you that if you take the approach that I took, that's what you're going to get. But I am sitting here telling you that taking that approach got us those results. And I'm not here to say, look at that, we got 1,000 downloads in 100 days, we're the best podcast. I'm here to tell you the feeling that comes from knowing that 1,000 people in the span of a little over 3 months have spent time with you and the people that you care about on a topic that you care about, enough to literally plan their day around it, because our shows are 2.5 hours long. That is the coolest feeling in the world. It is so touching and heartwarming and gratifying and mind-blowing. And if there's any way that we here at the Twist My Arm Podcast Network can share a little piece of that feeling that we are just drowning in, if I'm being honest, constantly, every day, every week, every time we put an episode out, every time we do a live episode, if we can share that experience with you, we would love to. That's kind of the point of hashtag TMA PodCon 21. So if you take anything away from me, I hope that you take away the key to everything here is authenticity. You have to be authentic. You have to care the most, or people will know, and you will know, and that will hurt. You have to be consistent. Whatever your release schedule is, stick to it. I don't care if it's weekly. I don't care if it's bi-weekly. I don't care if it comes out every 3 months. I don't care if it comes out on the second Tuesday of every month that has an R in it. Do that. Stick to it. Expect consistency from yourself. Because guess what? Your listeners do. When a new thing comes out on TV, they don't have to guess which day it's coming out. They tell you 100 times, Tuesday, 9/8 Central, be there. So be consistent. Make absolutely certain that you have an attitude of honesty, transparency, and just sharing with your team. You have to have that. If you have those first two things, that second part should be really, really easy. If you can be open and honest and accountable for yourself at all times with your team and your show, consistency and authenticity are going to be super easy, which is going to make it really easy to keep up the passion that I already know that you have, because you're making a freaking indie podcast. That's blood, sweat, tears, soul, and money. Okay? You have the passion. Make it work for you. When you reach out to people, be authentic. Don't send them a link right away. Just tell them thanks for the tiny little piece of support. Go from there. I think we're running up against the end of my segment. So I'm going to say, I know that my friend Josh, the head of the Twist My Arm Podcast Network, has been listening in and reading the chat for me the whole time. I'll be honest, I don't know if I looked away from the camera, Josh. I haven't been reading the chat. Are there any questions that came up in the chat that you want me to address that I failed to address as I was talking 100 miles an hour?
That is a negative.
Wonderful.
We had some good advice from Ricky D and Aaron
Ooh,
from Fan and
please
Thing
spotlight
Pod,
those.
just kind of stuff. Yeah. So thank you so much for doing that. That was an incredible segment. You absolutely killed it.
Thank you.
This has been a great first 2 hours of the first ever TMA PodCon. I do want to say that wrapping up this one, we're going to move over to our next segment with Pixie and Aaron, where we're talking about trying to be a better podcaster / host / interviewer / just a bunch of tips for engaging your audience as an actual indie podcaster. But again, thank you all so much. I have changed up the rules a little bit. If you're paying attention on Twitter, here we are. If you comment on any of these videos or you retweet with a question for us, it has to have a question. It can't just be a retweet or maybe a meme. I did enter Sinacera into the thing because he put a pretty funny meme in there, and I assume he's watching. So if you retweet with a question or just something there, you will be automatically entered in to the drawing to win a PodCon gift box.
And if I may, because I don't want to fail to practice what I preach, if you haven't, follow me on Twitter at Sudden But. Follow me on Instagram at Sudden But Inevitable Podcast. Check out the Sudden But Inevitable Rebop Season 2. We're going through Cowboy Bebop every Friday night at 8:30 Mountain Time at youtube.com/twistmyarmpodcast or at facebook.com/twistmyarmpodcast or at twistmyarmpodcast.com/live streams. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been Captain Boot Scoot, a.k.a. Vanilla Husband, a.k.a. your host, Jesse, and I want to say thank you to everybody who has been participating today in hashtag TMA PodCon 21. And the biggest thank you, of course, goes to my friend Josh, the head of the Twist My Arm Network and the host of the Twist My Arm podcast. Thank you, Josh, for making sure all of the wheels are turning and all the levers are pulling so that everybody out there can get what it is that we have to share.
Absolutely. I'll see you guys soon over in the Being a Better Host segment. Awesome.